Hey, welcome back to our morning devotions. We've been going through the book A View from the Zoo by Gary Richmond. He was a zookeeper at the LA Zoo in the 60s and 70s. Today's chapter is called Sins of the Father, and you can see that we are going to have camels in our story today. So I hope you enjoy. When I was first transferred to the Zoo Health Center, I was introduced to the most heartless man I have ever known. It might surprise you, but the man was an animal keeper. He was responsible for the hillside string, which included bison, tool elk, peccary, male deer, axis deer, and a solitary mountain goat. Even though my main duties were in the health center, I became his relief keeper 1 day a week. I didn't mind Hoofstock. In fact, I loved them, but since he never did any work, the area was always a mess by Friday. The first day we met, he told me how proud he was that he was paid so much for so little work. He claimed that he never worked more than 1 hour a day. The barns were in a location that gave him an excellent view of any approaching supervisors. He would sit atop the stacks of hay and read magazines. If anyone approached, he would leap off the hay bales and grab a rake and shovel and pretend he had been working. He even went so far to put water under his armpits so he would appear that he had worked up a good sweat. His laziness was disgusting, but it was not the quality which I cared for least. It was his cruelty. Benedict hated animals. He had his father, as had his father before him. They would never say that, but their actions yelled louder than their words. One fine day, when Bambi, the male mule deer, had grown an impressive 4-point set of antlers, Benedict decided he would enter the deer's yard. He wished to show off to an attractive college girl who was sketching the deer. During rutting season, deer can be very dangerous and very unpredictable. Benedict should have locked Bambi up, but he didn't because he delighted in showing his mastery over the animals. Benedict was carrying a leaf rake and poked Bambi in the side as he walked by. Bambi's instincts took over and he charged his antagonist. He rammed his antlers into the man's chest and knocked him down the hill. It was a steep hill, and Benedict tumbled 60 feet to the bottom. He was punctured in 4 places and shaken. When he stood up, the attractive college girl gave him a dirty look and walked away. Later that day, Benedict was quoted as having said, "If it's the last thing I do, I'm going to kill that deer." Nobody took him seriously, but they should have. As days went by, Bambi began to lose weight. His ribs began to show, and he would follow anyone who walked by his corral. The vets ordered stool samples to see if Bambi was suffering from parasites, but everything always checked out fine. We later came to believe that the stool samples delivered to us were those of the healthy axis deer next door. Blood was taken and it checked out fine. There was no good reason for the demise of Bambi. A new keeper was assigned to work Benedict's day off. It was not long until he suspected the deer was not being fed enough to survive. In a compassionate but foolish move, he dumped several scoops of herbivore pellets into Bambi's hay manger. Bambi, crazed with hunger, ate all the pellets. They caused him to become thirsty, and he drank too much water. Bambi died as a result of the acute gastric disturbances. The new keeper was issued a deficiency notice, and rightly so, but the real culprit went unpunished because nothing could be proven. When Benedict and I first talked together, he said jokingly, if you don't feed them, they don't make as big a mess." I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. All of his animals were thin and neglected, but the joke was on him. From that day until the day he was transferred, he had helpers that he knew not of. Benedict left at 4 p.m., and I left at 5 p.m. Right after he left, the senior keeper and I would slip down and give all his animals all the food they needed to thrive, and oh yes, to make a big mess. His new senior keeper also made him keep the corrals clean. 6 months later, Benedict was fired for intentionally driving a truck into a telephone pole. I had on occasion worked with his father and noticed he had a propensity to tease animals. He would delight in holding treats just out of reach of the orangutans and chimps at the health center. He also would give them lit cigarettes and laugh loudly if they burned themselves. Benedict's father was best known for having been attacked by Sam, the Bactrian camel. Sam knocked him down and grabbed his leg in his mouth, and he dashed him up and down and tried to squash his head with his enormous foot. Another keeper risked his own life to save Benedict's father. He had to hit the enraged camel with a shovel and hold him off until the injured man could be dragged from the exhibit. Prior to this, many keepers had reported seeing Benedict's father offering hay to Sam. When Sam would extend his lips to get the hay, Benedict's father would grasp them with his pliers and hold him there until he chose to let him go. He, like his son, had a terrible need to dominate the wild animals. That's how they gained their identity and sense of importance. It was difficult to calculate the impact of Benedict's father's example. Benedict had learned his irreverence for life from his father. When the scripture teaches that the sins of the parent visit the children unto the third and fourth generation, Exodus 25, I take it to mean that children keep picking up the values of the parents. Providing a good example is essential to raising decent children. One Saturday morning, I was walking by the Black Rhinos exhibit and was angered by what I saw. There were two boys on either side of their father throwing some rocks they had collected at the rhinos. They were rather large rocks, and the boys were throwing with all their might. The father wasn't saying or doing anything. He was just watching them pelt the rhino mercilessly. I yelled at the boys to stop, and they did. "Are these your boys?" I asked the father sternly. "Yeah," he answered defensively. I looked at him for a moment, wondered what to say next, and I asked, If you didn't want to be responsible for them, why did you have them?" He didn't know what to say. "Listen, if you want to help them behave, then you can see the rest of the zoo. If not, the front gate is that way. At any rate, I'm going to have security keep an eye on you." As I walked away, I overheard him say that if they embarrassed him again, he would beat them silly. We saw a lot of cruelty at the zoo. I helped pick up marshmallows concealing razor blades and fish hooks. I asked myself what kind of tortured mind would do that. I participated in several surgeries to repair golden eagles shot by local hunters. What a waste of a majestic animal. I remember grabbing a huge chunk of asphalt out of the hands of a 12-year-old boy who was going to throw it onto an alligator. He screamed, "You can't prove I was going to throw it!" What darkness resides in man's mind that allows these infringements and much worse? Albert Schweitzer gives us some insight in his reflection on his own childhood from the book Reverence of Life. While I was still going to a village school, we had a dog with light brown coat named Phylax. Like many others of his kind, he could not endure a uniform and always went for the postman. I was therefore commissioned to keep him in order whenever the postman came, for he was inclined to bite and had already been guilty of the crime attacking a policeman. I therefore used to take a switch and drive him into the corner of the yard and keep him there till the postman had gone. What a feeling of pride it gave me to stand like a wild beast tamer before him while he barked and showed his teeth, and to control him with blows of the switch whenever he tried to break out of the corner. But this feeling of pride did not last. When later in the day we sat side by side as friends, I blamed myself for having struck him. I knew that I could keep him back forever from the postman if I held him by the collar and stroked him. But when the fatal hour came around again, I yielded once more to the pleasurable intoxication of being a wild beast tamer. These kinds of flaws are in all of us to some degree because of the fall. What happened in Eden broke 4 relationships: man with God, man with man, man with himself, and man with nature. But now we must be commanded to be kind to animals, because it's not something that comes naturally. Proverbs 10:12 shares, "A righteous man has regard for the life of his beast." Jesus tells us that he approves of the idea of helping an animal in trouble, even if it means breaking the Sabbath. He sees the fall of the sparrow. The Lord is acquainted with every bird. Do you know how many birds there are? Billions, and yet God considers all the animals his private property. Psalm 50:10. Animal cruelty is a terrible sin. How wonderful that the new heaven and new earth will be free of it. Isaiah 11:6-8 says, "The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like an ox. And the suckling child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den." Isn't that great? You don't want to miss it, so be sure to be there. If you want to, in the comments below, go ahead and just leave a comment about what this meant to you today, just as a way to share with others, and we will hopefully see you tomorrow.